Hello and welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz and today is True Crime Tuesday. So last week, I'm still reeling from last week. We talked about Issei Sagawa, a topic that is not for the faint of heart or the weak of stomach. We're going to switch gears again today, and first of all, happy May. I'm really loving the spring weather. It was long overdue over here, and yes, it just feels nice. Winters can be pretty brutal here, and I've got to be part rock lizard or something along those lines, because you know when you just need to bask? Anyway, I'm enjoying getting back out in nature and seeing the flowers blooming and all of that good stuff. It's always good. But today's story is going to take place in the fall, and although I'm not even close to ready to start thinking about that, let me try and set the scene. It's fall in Iowa. Fall is something that over here in New England we are really proud of. I hear they have some similar foliage over that way, brilliant oranges, fiery reds, and sunny yellows. So this time of year is just beautiful there. Anyways, Deborah Hind was just waking up. She had a house on a pond, so she was used to noises from wildlife every so often, but at around 7:30 she heard knocking on her door. And when she looked to see who it possibly could be banging on her door at such an early hour, she thought her eyes could be playing tricks on her. It looked straight out of a horror movie. There was a young woman at her doorstep, covered in blood. It looked like her throat was cut. Horrified, she opened the door and the woman fell inside. She couldn't understand what she was trying to say, so the woman handed her a note. She took the note and unfolded it, and she read, "A man killed my boys and tried to kill me." Deborah would attempt to calm her down and make her as comfortable as she could while she called 911. Responders would come, and the woman, who would be identified as Michelle Kehoe, would end up being airlifted to a nearby hospital for treatment due to how horrible her wound was. The cut to her neck had even punctured her trachea, so she was fortunate to survive. The police would interview her and try and figure out what had happened to her. She initially wasn't able to speak, so she had to write down the answers to all of their questions. Before we get into what happened to her, you need to know a few more things about Michelle. Michelle was born on March 27th of 1973. Her father would tragically pass away in a car accident when she was only 6, and unfortunately after that she would suffer from sexual abuse at the hands of the man her father would remarry, his nephew, and one of her neighbors. This would happen until she was 13 and came up with the courage to tell her mother about it. Her mother would respond by sending her away to live with her aunt. But it's said that she did end up readjusting well there. And things seemed to take a turn for the better for her when she met her husband Gene in 1993 and ended up marrying him 3 years later. They would welcome their first son, Sean, into the world in September of 2001, and then Seth in October of 2006. She would end up rebuilding her relationship with her mother when she was older, and her mother ended up needing care. So she would end up telling the detectives that the evening prior she had loaded her boys into the van and that they had headed up to go visit her mother, who was now in a nursing home. On the way, she stopped for gas, and when she did, a man climbed into the van with them. He was in his late 50s with a stocking cap and a trench coat on. He told her to start driving east, and she attempted to fight him off with her pepper spray, but he ended up overpowering her, and he knocked her out by slamming her head against the side of the van. And when she came to, she saw both of her boys were dead. Their throats had been cut. At this point, the man would cut her throat and leave her there to die as well. She would pass out from these injuries and wake up later to seek help, which would take us back to the beginning of the story where she finds herself at Deborah's door. Responders would in fact find the van and the boys almost a day after the attack had happened, and to their surprise, Sean, the older of Michelle's two sons, was still alive, which was such wonderful news considering what they went through. There was just one problem though. When they asked little Sean about the man who attacked his family, he stated that his mother had hurt him and killed his baby brother. So hold up. There were several elements of Michelle's story that did not add up. Even before you add in the fact that her son lived to tell what actually happened, apparently the detectives had that key piece of information when they went to interview Michelle, and they just let her tell her lies before confronting her with the fact that her son was, first of all, still alive, and that he told them what she had done. And at this point, she gave in and confessed. So on October 26th of 2008, Michelle would load her boys into the van, stating that she was going to visit her mother. She did actually stop at the alleged gas station in her story to ask for directions to a park so that her sons could blow off some steam. At this point, no man climbed into their van. Instead, she would drive herself and her boys down to the lake, at which point she would pull out the duct tape and hunting knife that she had purchased almost a month prior. At this point, she would grab Sean and cover his eyes and mouth with tape before slitting his throat. She would repeat the same process with her 2-year-old Seth, at which point Sean says he lifted some of the tape from his eyes because he heard his brother screaming, and he actually saw his mother kill his brother. She walked off and attempted to slit her own throat after this, not realizing that she hadn't actually killed Sean, and he was able to crawl into the van and hide. Rescuers would find him there the next morning, and his brother's body was about 10 feet away with a first aid kit next to him, indicating that Sean was attempting to help Seth after their mom had left. Sean would survive after a 45-minute surgery to close the wound that was 8 centimeters long, 2 centimeters wide. It had also completely cut through 2 of his veins and the first layer of neck muscle. Seth would also die due to 2 cuts that he received to his jugular vein. So that's what actually happened. Where do we even start with this one? Let's start with that she attempted to use an insanity plea, claiming that she knew her boys would go to heaven even if she went to hell for doing what she did. Sounds not all right in the head to me, but it also sounds like she knew what she was doing was wrong at the same time. So now let's learn a few more key things about Michelle. Michelle had at least 3 prior suicide attempts before she killed Seth and attempted to kill Sean and herself. The first occurred in March of 1998 when she attempted to drink antifreeze. Then in February of 1999, she checked herself into a motel and attempted to slice her femoral artery, which is the one that's in your thigh. That didn't work either, and the wound would just end up clotting. When Jean would ask her why she would attempt to take her own life, her response was that everything was just so hopeless that this seemed like a solution. I kind of just want to say, poor woman. She would undergo electroshock therapy and try over 44 of these treatments. The suicide attempts would stop for a time after she and Jean would welcome Sean into the world in 2001. She would also suffer from a few miscarriages before having Seth in 2006. Then in December of 2007, she lost control of her car and skidded into a river. Her boys were inside with her, but luckily there were 4 men who witnessed the car go in, and they were able to save Michelle and her boys. She would suffer PTSD from this incident, but would later admit that this was in fact also another murder and suicide attempt. Can you freaking imagine? After this happened, Michelle would start to preoccupy her thoughts with suicide, considering it her only way out. Life was not making it easy for her to fight these thoughts either. Her mother would fall ill and move closer to them, and her husband would lose his job. A month before the attack, she would buy her hunting knife and duct tape, and she would just wait till she was ready to strike. When asked about it, Gene will say that he's here to help. Then he has to correct himself and say he was there to help, because that's how he saw it. And I can only imagine the amount of guilt that he must carry to an extent anyways for not being able to provide enough help to prevent what ended up happening. Now, he says that people think that he has to choose between his wife and his kids, but he doesn't really see it that way. He loves all of them, which really is so sad. However, he does see Seth as someone he loves who died, and even though Michelle killed him, she is someone who is hurting, who he loves, and is still alive. I can't even imagine. So he isn't even allowed to have any sort of contact at all with Michelle if he wants to keep raising Sean, because she isn't allowed contact with him. But beyond that, she isn't allowed contact with any of his caretakers, which right now is Gene. So in order to successfully be found not guilty because you are insane, you can't just be insane. You need to have no ability to distinguish the differences between right and wrong. Studies show that as low as 1% of defendants will attempt to use this defense, and of those, maybe a quarter or so are successful. You have to be insane basically. A few things showed Michelle had planned to murder her children, such as picking a time her husband couldn't join her and purchasing the materials she would need about a month prior. Add to that the prior attempt in the river, and you have a pretty good argument that she knew what she was attempting to do. She also seemed to be aware that her husband would have stopped her if he knew what she was up to. Michelle was found guilty of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and child endangerment resulting in serious injury. She would receive a life sentence for the murder, along with 25 years for the attempted murder, and then 10 more years for child endangerment. She tried to appeal her sentence, but it was upheld. What do you guys think? Was she insane? Was she insane and guilty, or was she not guilty because the extent of her insanity, as she claims? Let me know what you think in the comments, but as always, please try to be as kind as possible, especially with this one. It's a touchy one. So that is going to do it for today, but as always, let's try to end today on a more positive note. Today we're going to highlight a young boy named Waylon, who is also from Iowa. Waylon is a kindergartner who goes to Western United Methodist Church in Vinton. And his passion is giving back to the community. He started by donating half of his birthday money to the church's food pantry, and by doing so, his example helped inspire others to donate, and the pantry reached record level donations this past year. He pulls the carts between each room to help as they distribute the food, and he has no intention of stopping. That's because it's his spot, and everyone should be able to have chocolate chip pancakes. I love that so much. Great job, Waylon, and I hope you don't ever stop. All right, everyone. I hope you mothers all have a fantastic Mother's Day. I'll be back the following Tuesday with another doozy for you, possibly about another mother. We'll see. And until then, please stay safe out there. Bye.